thank you all for being here again, and not there's more, so it's better. So it's good to see the same places at least. Does anybody need a book? Not need a book. They have them out there. If not, I got some. All right, so we'll get started with our memory verse today. So say it with me. But when they did not find them, they dragged Jason and his friend to the city. Yeah, these are the term the world. Better read really fast. Better slow down. So this class, for those that weren't here last week, is kind of an eclectic class. We're a little bit all over the place as far as we're going to start. We talked about cults last week. We're going to talk about conspiracy theories today. We're going to talk about hedonism tomorrow, or not tomorrow, next week. And then we're going to go into different individual faiths that some could argue have a lot of these components to them. So I found this was on Friday from the BBC. So this is kind of interesting that, cults in the news, right? So it's going to bring this to the attention of the class. So kind of interesting. This, I think, was in Kenya. It was a man convinced his followers that, hey, you need to go start yourself because that'll help you get to heaven quicker. I don't know if that means like dying quicker or what. I don't know. But we see this, and it's kind of interesting. I mean, what's the image right there? It's the Holy Bible, the cross, like inspires, Christianity, this is a cult together. So this is something that we might sometimes be accused of in the eyes of the world of maybe believing things like this. So it's always good to be mindful of the fact that some people might have these preconceived notions about us. And these are all over the place. So Kenya is obviously a faraway land, but there's another example later in the class closer to home. So as far as the calendar, we're on the allure of the mystical, conspiracy theories. Again, next week we'll go into more hedonism. That one's kind of a strange title: irreligion, Satanism, hedonism, and all this. Basically, it's the cult of you, is what I'm calling it. And then we'll get into Jehovah's Witnesses after that. And the individual faiths, those are going to be two classes, whereas these are more one. So kind of the same disclosures as last week. I want to make sure this class and next class will give the same disclosures as last week. Just centering what is the goal of this presentation of our discussion. Our goal is to rightly divide the word in order to have wisdom to know how to handle these types of questions. And then kind of the shorter version of these 4 points: identify basic beliefs of these. We're not going to go into basic beliefs of conspiracy theories, but what do they look like? Identify the allure of it. Why are people choosing these things? Discuss methods to guard our own hearts, and then discuss methods to reach others that might be drawn to these types of things. And people we work with, whatever it might be, how do we approach those people? And there's a lot of opinions in this class. So with that, there's the distinct possibility of maybe saying things that other people might disagree with. And you might see something a little bit differently. You might have a different tactic to talk to somebody. And that might be okay. And so, as we go through these, I wanted to read these two scriptures kind of again to set the tone for the class and how we talk to each other. The first off, a soft answer turns away wrath, a harsh word stirs up anger. The tongue of the wise uses knowledge rightly, but the mouth of fools pours forth foolishness. And then in Colossians, therefore, as the elect of God, holy and beloved, put on tender mercies, kindness, humility, meekness, long suffering, bear with one another, and forgive one another. If anyone has a complaint against another, even as Christ forgave you, you must also do. And so that's kind of on one side. And that I ran across a quote from Alexander Campbell, a reading earlier this week, that I think this class is very heavily discussion based. So as we discuss, there can be things that you could categorize as debate maybe sometimes. So he participated in a ton of different debates, and I found this quote really interesting. He said, "There are not a few who deprecate religious controversy as an evil of no small magnitude." Basically, a lot of people don't like debates. So, because it's in the context he's coming off of a debate, he's getting his thought on. He says, "But these are either ill-informed or those conscious that their principles will not bear investigation. So long as there is good and evil, truth and error in this world, so long there will be opposition. For it is in the nature of good and evil and of truth and of error to oppose each other. We cheerfully confess that this is much to be regretted that controversy among Christians should exist, but it is more to be regretted that error, the professed cause of it, should exist. So as long, and we're all trying to rightly divide, none of us have made it in our faith that we found the truth. This is it completely. Like we have the Bible. It's us rightly dividing, trying to continuously find out what the truth is. So with that, there's going to be discussion. We're all on different levels of our maturity and our learning. So it's okay for us to have conversation. Any thoughts on that's kind of a long-winded introduction. All right, good. So we'll get into the actual purpose of the class. All right, so in short, what is a conspiracy theory? What do y'all think? We'll get into the definitions based on Merriam-Webster or something in a minute, but what do y'all think? Sophia. I said last week, anytime in silence, I'll just go to Sophia. We use terrorist tactics here.
Conspiracy is just two people agreeing to do something together.
Okay, yeah.
That's
So
a very,
conspiracy.
that's a very strict definition of it.
Yeah.
Obviously, we use it in a broader way.
Right.
Right, two components conspiring together to do something, and usually, not always, but usually it's negative. Okay, you can conspire to do good things. I guess you're planning a birthday party or something like that. But in the theory, something you just can't prove. It's just something that you've got a good educated guess about, and you're gathering facts and information, and you're trying to prove that. That's point.
Right. And the word conspiracy actually, unlike cult, necessarily appears in the Bible. There's images of conspiracies. The Jews formed a conspiracy to go try to kill Paul. You know, they swore an oath that we will not sleep or eat, I forget what point it is, until we kill him. What about theory? What do y'all think as far as like adding that second little word onto that?
It's supposed to be unprovable in the strictest term. It's the ideas, maybe a preponderance of evidence in some cases, but in the scientific where it versus a fact that can be proven.
Have an idea, present that as the truth.
So to go along with that, this is kind of what dictionaries say. So a theory that explains an event or set of circumstances as a result of a secret plot by usually powerful conspirators. So that's kind of what we were talking about. A belief that some secret but influential organization is responsible for an event or phenomenon. And I don't know about y'all, that's kind of the way I see it. A lot of times it's the second quote, I think might be a little more accurate based on what we've seen in the world. What do y'all think about this topic? So I threw this out there. This wasn't something I was like, hey, make sure you talk about conspiracy theory. When I was looking at cults, it was like a natural thing that just kept coming up in my mind. And I've had a lot of conversations with people I work with, family members. It's like maybe I'm just more aware of it now, but I feel like I'm having these types of conversations a lot more. And maybe it's the advent of COVID too, that's kind of like exploded into the mainstream. Am I alone in this? What do y'all think?
Yeah.
I'm alone in this.
Well, no.
Yeah, let's give me a quiet class. Yeah, good.
Well, the joke now, the definition of conspiracy theory is next month's news. This as a mind control technique to form an us versus them mentality. So in Scientology's case, L. Ron Hubbard was mad that psychologists did not like his theories of mental health rehabilitation, and so he made them into the boogeyman, and so they became the boogeyman in all of his writings. And so they, as part of their teaching, then all psychiatrists, anyone who works in mental health, has become part of some cabal that's trying to enslave the world. And then the cult only has the secret knowledge to help you overcome this evil. And so,
Right.
Yes, there are evil people in the world. As Christians, we can't be naive about evil, but we can't be overwhelmed by evil in the world either.
Right. And we're gonna get into a lot of that. That's the realm where I want the definition to go. Much like cults, it's kind of hard to wrap your mind around sometimes, or even set a definition, because it's like, well, I know what a conspiracy theory is. It's something I don't agree with. I think it's secret. I believe it. But if I believe in something, it's like, well, no, that's fact, but it might be a conspiracy theory to someone else. So it's totally, I asked a couple of really loaded questions in here, and it requires a lot of context if you're thinking. The right answer is a lot of times, well, it depends. It depends what is a conspiracy theory. Because how Christians approach the world could be a conspiracy theory to an atheist that has purely secular beliefs, right? You know, is there a evil force in the world? Yeah, Satan exists, right? But that might be seen as something that is more of a conspiracy thought. So when y'all think of, also, what do y'all think as far as secular versus religious? Are there any other categories you can think of, or is that pretty much like, let's try to
But you basically
this
said
in-
of the world and not of the world. There's no other category to really define anything else. So
so is how you're going to approach those going to be different?
it's of the world or it's not of the world. You can't have anything else in between.
Like it's like a road. So I like it. Good.
It's like you're smart.
Some are more important to debate with someone than others. obviously.
That's yeah.
If they're worried about government and aliens and those kinds of things, you can just table that for now. If it's, you know, something that is going to affect how they interpret the Bible or how they live their life as far as moral stand, then yes, those are things that we need to examine truths on.
So let's.
It's the pearls before swine.
That's exactly what we're going to get at.
I think there's a difference too, at least for me, as I was reading the materials, distinctions between understanding influence of foreign actors upon other nations, understand those things happen. That's not necessarily a conspiracy theory. Also understanding that there's a difference between conspiracy theory pushing an agenda versus a false doctrine. So there's false doctrines. That's not conspiracy theory. That's just simply false doctrine. So there's some distinctions there that we need to draw to make sure that we're kind of talking about the same
Absolutely.
thing as we're studying.
And I intentionally tried to mesh these together a little bit so that we could draw those exact points out. That's what I'm wanting. So yes, secular versus religious, of the world, not of the world. How we deal about them going to be completely different. So we're going to get right into that. So when you think of conspiracy theories, don't just put the pigeonhole them into cults, like what cults you're using. Use like, I mean, we just went through several years of, you know, all over just different things being inundated with this. What are qualities that you see and from your own experience with conspiracy theories? What you would like with this?
Well, there's kind of an allure to some sort of secret knowledge that, you know, I've figured this out and other people need to hear what I've figured out. Whatever the topic is, it's one of the alluring parts of the conspiracy theory.
It's absolutely.
I think of Proverbs 18:17. The one who states his case first seems right till the other comes and examines him. A lot of conspiracy theory will prey on misinformation. And while there are certainly, like Stephen said, outside influences of other nations trying to do things, that certainly does exist. But most of the time, or at least if you go or you talk to people who draw conspiracy theories, they'll normally say that, oh, I listened to this podcast about it. And you'll go, okay, well, did you listen to the other side of the argument? Well, no. Well, of course, that's what you're going to think because all the information that was given to you makes it sound like it's true. And so that also goes with the idea of false doctrine, which is why sometimes it can be tied, these things can be tied in along with cults, is that if you only look at one thing, one side of a coin, listen to one side of an argument, only consume one part of the story, that's all you're ever going to come away with. And naturally, that's how it works. So.
Well, and a lot of times cults or things like this will create a fear of seeking out knowledge or the other side. So it's like, you can't trust them. There's already a distrust there that whatever they're telling you is a lie. They're out to get you or whatever. So it makes it even harder to educate yourself because you're already like, you already think that there is no other truth.
That's the us versus them mentality.
Yeah, I was just gonna say Proverbs 18:2, so the fool takes the pleasure in understanding but only expressing his.
Yeah, it's funny to use the word education also, the thing you go, because that's so I have family members that are very much into this, that we have deep, usually very late at night conversations. And it's exhausting. And so, I mean, part of this is like, I really like, I want to know, like, the questions aren't like, I'm asking y'all like advice, you know what I mean? That's it. Because it's, the conversation is always, hey, I just want to educate you. It's that's the thing. And I honestly try in my own eyes to say, okay, well, let's both look to what the Bible says and let's draw that. It's not necessarily me educating you or showing you this thing, but it's us trying to rightly divide together. So that's a huge component of it. And it's a really hard thing for me in my mind. So
Feels like there's a social media component to this,
Oh,
right?
I'm glad you
Because
brought
click
that up.
on that article and you're gonna get more of those articles. You're someone who spends a lot of time
Yeah.
doing that, it's super easy, it could be super easy to get drawn into things.
yeah, that's a great point, and we'll bring that up too when we talk like how do you guard your heart against this? Be aware that it's not a hidden evil that's out there, but there's an algorithm
Yes.
many times that its purpose is to make money and have your time, and you just have to be aware of that.
I think one of the biblical examples, it's not spelled out, but in 2 Corinthians 11, I don't know if you're going to go there at some point, but when the brethren there in Corinth, Paul writes to them and says, I fear lest somehow as a serpent deceived Eve by his craftiness, so your minds may be corrupted from the simplicity that is in Christ. For if he who comes preaches another Jesus, whom we've not preached, or if you receive a different spirit which you've not received, or a different gospel which you may not accept, you may well put up with it. I think that's probably addressing some of the Gnosticism that existed in the day. And to me, that's closer to what you're talking about. Is like, hey, it's kind of that cultish thinking, special knowledge, secret, understanding that, let me, better educate you and draw you away from the simplicity of the truth. I think that's what, when I think about this topic related to the scriptures, that's kind of where it lands. When I think about the foreign actors, I think of, Balaam and Pharaoh. What he said was true. He went, but that's not a conspiracy theory. It's just a foreign actor having influence on a nation, and it's foreign nations seeking to destroy another and seeking out, hey, what kind of intelligence can we use against them?
Right.
And that's not a conspiracy theory.
Well, it can be categorized as conspiracy, but
They can be conspiring, but it's not a conspiracy theory. So they're conspiring against another nation, but it's not a conspiracy theory. There's a distinction there.
there is a distinction.
You know,
That's what I would argue it's still. So I use example in here of Project Azorian from the CIA.
Yeah.
So that like this is real world. So the CIA, the sort of it is the Russians lost this back in the 70s. Russians lost a nuclear submarine. It had it blew up, essentially sank. Russians couldn't find it. CIA knew where it was, and they built an entire cover story to go get it. They created a company with Howard Hughes, and they started a new industry. I mean, it had PR campaigns. It was a big deal, and the Russians bought it, and they went out there and recovered the submarine. So if someone at that time, it is based out of California, if they looked at that and was like, I think that's a CIA cover front for going and going to go after this, submarine or something else, like, could that be seen as a conspiracy theory? Yeah, I mean, there's this CIA or small group of actors is fronting this, and you can be seen as crazy. Does that mean that it's not true? No. But as far as like a secular topic, my argument is that we don't have to make a decision on it. We can look at that and be like, I don't know. It doesn't have anything to do with the Bible. Fundamentally, I don't care. Like it doesn't necessarily affect me. Is that kind of an accurate?
Well, later in the questions you brought up Daniel
Yeah.
and Nebuchadnezzar. This goes back to one commentator I like to listen to calls anger the devil's cocaine, because people are hooked on, and the algorithm feeds it to you. And so these things that we have no control over, we have to just let go. Now, occasionally Christians will be in a position to do something just and right that might cause a big impact on the world. So Daniel was third of the kingdom. So if Daniel had been in the situation, like he said, if you put him in modern America, if he's head of one of these government, and there are Christians in all of these agencies, if they are in a position to do right, then yes, it is their job to then do right and seek these answers out. But those of us that live in the normal world,
Yeah.
I can only do right by the things that I have control over. And I can pray about things that bother me and give them to God, but I can't let things I can't control upset my world.
And that in a nutshell is kind of what I want the goal of this discussion to be. Because I do like, I know Christians, I know again, family members that are drawn into this. So I know it's prevalent. Either that or I just have really weird friends and family. So. What's or comment?
I also have an idea that you can popularize something by consuming that type of movies, television, comics, books, everything. How many books, movies, TVs, video games have you played where there's a shadow organization pulling strings from somewhere? They're everywhere. And so people consume that. Same thing with the multiverse idea.
Oh, yeah.
Like every single media I've ever seen recently took that idea and ran with it. And so
You don't believe that.
yeah, people believe it now. But when it first came out, everyone was like, well, that sounds stupid. But then Superman starts traveling and you're like, oh, this guy who can fly faster than a speeding bullet, whatever. But if you get told something enough as well, even from just things that aren't real, you can start believing it. Because it's fun. It is kind of fun to be the protagonist.
It's
of fighting.
alluring,
Yeah, you're the hero. So,
No, it's brilliant.
Just gonna add on, I mean, the more you, things in the media, the more you normalize things. It's the same thing with the gender.
Yeah. It's not as fringe,
Right.
it's not, I mean, that's the thing with social media. I mean, you get plugged in with anyone else that believes this, and then it's kind of a loop of confirmation bias. Like, oh, you believe this? Oh, it's not weird. Okay, I can believe it. And you just go, and then all of a sudden you're kind of down a rabbit hole. Exactly. So,
Can I go back to that last one? Just so to add on what you said, yes, and it's like one of the ways that we can go down that, where we are following things that aren't correct, is people will change language and use different language, right? Transgender, use that. So I'm saying transgender, that's not a thing.
Yeah.
But how many times have we said that? Hopefully we're not, because that's not a thing. You are, you're not. You're one gender or the other. God gives that gender. That's it. But that's now made it into our language in every avenue. Now, this second point, are certain people especially susceptible to these ideas? I think open-minded people sometimes are. I think some of the people that are secluded. I think Christians, we're supposed to be the salt of the earth and the salt of the world. The city set on a hill. We're supposed to be different. And so I think sometimes, maybe even Christians, because we're not lemmings, we're not supposed to be. We don't go off the cliff with the earth. Sometimes we can go down that rabbit hole and follow things that are conspiracy theories without evidence, but we're supposed to be looking for that evidence.
do you think it's fair to say that weak Christians would be susceptible to this, especially susceptible?
I think in more ways than one. I think sometimes if we trust certain individuals within a group, like a church, like, okay, we have a great eldership here, but I mean, Steve, I'm sorry if you say something, I'll have to look and see what's happening. We got to search every single thing from every single person, because I've seen it. Churches will go down the wrong path, following people instead of what scripture. And so that's where your cult comes in. And so, yes, I think we're susceptible to that. But on the other end, I think since we're so separate as individuals, I think sometimes we can be susceptible to following a lot of conspiracy theories because we're not lemmings. So you can have both within the same group.
I was just gonna say, Christians in general, whether weak or not, I think can be susceptible to this a little bit, because think about some of the things that we believe, like very much these supernatural things that have happened, right? People being raised from the dead, people being healed, food being created from nothing, right? So some of the things that we believe, just in relative to reality today, are kind of out there already, right? So it's not always a stretch to say, oh, well, this is really not that different than some of those things, right?
No, I think you have to be honest with yourself too about it. And I think to maybe expand on or piggyback on whatever you want to call it is we have to be aware that that's also how people see us. So we can't, this isn't just us looking on the outside and be like conspiracy theories. It's how other people are viewing us and how we need to be mindful of that when we're talking to them. Just because it, again, it's like the,
Our interpretation of the first 6 chapters of Genesis are completely out there for most Christians.
Yeah.
Do we take a literal interpretation of those miracles?
any other comments from them? So this, yes, Sophia.
I think one of the dangers that like we've seen in our family is that it starts off as like an innocent conspiracy theory that's not religious, and then but a lot of them are connected to each other, and so it's a rabbit hole. And then so you believe this conspiracy theory that's connected and keeps going, and to the point where you're at this other. This negates the Bible.
Yeah.
This negates the Bible, then starts confusing them because then they're like, well, but I believe all these things leading up to this one that negates the Bible.
It's a slippery slope is what it leads to. And a lot of these, the natural conclusion ends with something really, really bad happening. I mean, and this is just an example where, you know, I brought this up last week about, you know, a mom who ended up children, they were zombies or whatever. I know a doctor that I work with that he was one of his like groomsmen or something. It made national news because he's one of these guys that believes in like lizard people. I don't know if y'all have ever heard this one. It's a very, very prominent conspiracy theory. So if you haven't, you have a really good group of friends. But for those of us who are like me, so this guy, he actually was thought that his children were of the devil, and so he took them to Mexico and killed them. I mean, and it made national news. So I mean, this is, you know, I know I'm too connected from this, you know, so this is out there. What one thing too to expand just while I'm thinking about on Sophia's point of, I kept in my mind bringing up cognitive dissonance. And it's basically, you can't just live a normal life and have these radical wild views and just continue to exist without crazy amount of anxiety. Like just being, it's like you're lying to yourself. You have this truth that isn't the truth, and it affects how you see society and everything about you. And if you don't believe that, the amount of anxiety as you as a person is going to have is overwhelming. And that's similar to, you know, as a Christian, that if you know that hell is, then you should not continue to sin, right? I mean, that's two separate points. It's kind of similar, I guess, in how they relate to one another. So let's get into kind of some of the questions. So how deeply should you as a Christian entertain spiritual conspiracy theories? And pardon me?
Spiritual is
Oh.
God's one.
Sorry, did I skip ahead?
Yeah.
Hold on. Spiritual. Yes, okay, sorry. Spiritual conspiracy theories. This is a loaded one. We've already kind of talked about like, okay, is there a difference between conspiracy theories and false doctrine? I would say no. That's what I would submit to y'all. But again, I want this to be kind of a discussion kind of base because I want us to bridge these two like we were talking about. If you were going to have a study with somebody, what kind of guardrails would y'all put in place?
What sources you're allowed to use.
I like that. That wasn't matter.
Well, I was thinking about like people make entire doctrines based on what the Nephilim were out of Genesis, and it's like,
Yeah, the Apocrypha, right?
Really?
Like, I
you
mean,
don't know. It doesn't tell me. I don't need to know.
so
That's my conclusion. I don't know what the Nephilim were. Does it affect? What else does it affect as far as how I'm supposed to live, or how but if you're using it to completely derail how you're interpreting the Bible, what other sources are you using then to define this word?
right. So expanding on that one verse, in my conversations, I keep coming to is Genesis 6:1-2. So now it came to pass when men began to multiply in the face of the earth and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful, and they took wives to themselves of all whom they chose. And so, like, I'll have these in-depth conversations with people about this. It's like, obviously, there's an angelic race, and they had children, and it goes on and on and on. And it's, you know, people spend hours and hours and hours studying this, but none of the rest of the Bible. And it's like that doesn't fit in anywhere. And So that's kind of part of this question. What do you do for this?
I guess for that thing too, I'd say, well, the flood happened, so they're gone. Wherever they were, they're dead. So why do you care about them anymore? It's cool to theorize about it. I mean, the Nephilim, it's an awesome, that's an awesome name. It's a cool thing to put in the Star Wars race, right? But at that point, it's just, it's all gone. That age is over. What are you going to do today? But it's just what I would say.
It's really good.
Maybe being able to identify where assumptions are. Like, I don't know how effective that would be, because I feel like in some cases, they don't view it as an assumption in their reasoning. But it's like, I don't know, for me, a lot of times that's very clear. It's like, okay, well, where's the evidence for this thought that you got to? Because I mean, usually it's like, oh, the scripture says this. So therefore over here, and there's really there's no connecting points. Whereas I'm the one to think like, okay, but how did you get to that conclusion? And try to point out where we're assuming things. I think that's good for ourselves as well. It's like, we have to be careful of that ourselves. But I don't know how, like I said, I don't know how effective that would be for somebody. I don't know that they're gonna actually think to themselves.
I mean, it takes a clear mind. There are difficult passages. I'm not saying that's not a difficult passage, you know, but it's like that if someone comes to me and says, hey, how do I like I'm wanting to learn about God. Can you point me in the right direction? I don't say, hey, go read Revelation. Where it's at. You know, well, no, there's meatier scripture, and if people have a basic understanding and just a clear mind and able to reason, it's very dangerous.
I would say maybe one thing you can do is say, we have to focus our study today on this one topic, because I don't know whether you start talking to someone about salvation or the church that the Lord built. Let's look at Acts and let's see what the church that the Lord built looks like. Cool. You have to be baptized to be saved. Cool. What about the dinosaurs? Like, can we talk about dinosaurs next time? Like, yes, we can cover these things, but sometimes you hit these spiritual roadblocks, and it's a good way to bail off the highway of I don't want to live like you.
Right. And I've been told
Because you
too,
can't
like,
answer all my weird questions about
right.
things.
And,
that no one knows.
I've been told in bringing something like that up, well, I mean, but does that matter? Like, why isn't this just as weighty as baptism? You know, like, well, the entire New Testament talks about this. Right? I'll take any recommendation.
Sorry, I'm talking again.
No, also,
People, whenever they want to have an excuse to not do something, will grab and cling to anything they possibly can. You have to recognize whether or not someone just wants to do something in order to say, well, you can't do it all, therefore I shouldn't listen to you. Well, you're not going to find that with anybody, because nothing has all the answers. And so, yeah, it's the same thing like spiritual conspiracies with angels, right? Bible doesn't really talk a lot about angels. Yeah, but their whole definition is messengers of God, and they do that job very well. And that's all you really need to know about them, because that's all they're defined as, and that's all they are. But one of them can kill 160,000 soldiers in a single night. That's pretty cool. But that's all you're going to be able to get.
yes,
I was just gonna say, you know, talking to certain people, so many people that live upstairs in the house. Like the ultimate conspiracy theory is the resurrection of Jesus. I mean, that's huge. Of a small group that pretended this thing happened. And I mean, there's been books and movies, and I mean, I think that maybe isn't something we see as a conspiracy theory because we believe it's true, but to the world, that's an ultimate conspiracy theory that tricks a lot of people.
Worth fighting, because that one is the linchpin of the entire gospel.
right. And so that would be this question here. So is it necessary to establish a view on these things, on doctrine? I'd say probably, right? Like you have to, like, yes, I mean, you have to be able to refute all of these things. Now, that doesn't mean that someone's asked a wild question that it should just rock your faith, and now you have to spend all your time focusing on that. Like there are some things that, I mean, it's all so common sense that it is what it is. Like it doesn't tip me at all if someone believes that the earth is flat. Like that is ridiculous. You know, like there's pictures, there's all this other stuff, and they have answers for all that. It's like, okay, I don't need to spend any time with it. Which is where I am.
My favorite answer to that one is your GPS wouldn't work if that was true.
Yeah, totally, right? And I mean, those are common sense, right? And how much time do you spend thinking about that? Zero. You know, so when someone comes and questions that, it's like, whoa, wait a second. But you do have to be okay with just pushing some things aside because it's so ridiculous. So, oh yeah, sorry. Last,
So, yeah, real quick. Don had the quote of the day, I think. This is all a huge distraction sometimes. My house has never been cleaner than when I always have something else to do. And so I will get distracted. And so that happens in thought, like he's talking about, like we get distracted, even ourselves, we might look into spending time in things that are not important. But I tell you what, though, we have to be prepared for these conversations because this is our doorway to get to the other things. And if we can't answer one question or two questions about what somebody is interested in, they're going to shut us off and be like, well, this is not important to you. This is important to me at this moment. So yes, we need to get to the gospel, but we got to at least acknowledge what they're asking about
that's a great point.
to have a conversation.
And how do you, so in my example, I'm trying to give too many details, but like essentially a young person had doubts along these lines and brought it to people in the church and they kind of blew them off and was like, just have faith. Like, great, what does that mean? You know, like, yeah. And so on some point, like you do have like, this is long suffering, this is studying, rebuking. A lot of it is, okay, I have to be willing to, on the flip side, go down and rightly divine the truth and show someone and not call them crazy, make them feel crazy. Like there's a lot of reason that has to go into this, even though I think maybe it's a waste of time. I just have to have humility about it. Maybe they're not there yet. They're in the context of scripture, a weaker brother or sister and I need to do.
Or this is their hobby and this is how they connect with people. Like it could be a cover for the underlying traumas that govern their life, and this is just how they express themselves.
Good. Let's go. So secular conspiracy theories. So we've talked religious, now secular. Can I just go forward and just say it doesn't matter and just skip through here?
Yes.
Yeah. I believe I agree with you, but again, I got a ton of friends that think this way. So like it rules their life. So how do you approach something like this? What do you? Yes.
I think one thing you don't do is treat them like they're dumb or crazy. And you know, it might be something crazy, but that's not going to be helpful in the situation. You know, you can guide them to the truth. But something you said earlier about often people that are in some kind of conspiracy theory will say, well, let me educate you.
Yeah.
Let me show you the truth, or you know, whatever. But I know I know you're talking about secular, but as far as spiritual things, I think it's more helpful in studying with someone to be like, let's study this together. Like, I'm seeking the truth too. Let me show you what I've seen in scripture. You know, if you see something different, let me know. But just not just completely dismissing people.
Yeah. That is a challenge for me. That's very hard.
Well, depending on what it is, I mean, I think generally when you're communicating with someone, you just want to be heard, you know, whether someone agrees with you or not. And, you know, I'm sure people want you to buy into their crazy things because, like Kyle said, you know, there's an allure to being the one that has that secret knowledge and being able to spread that, you know, but
I mean, to that point, like what we believe to a non-believer is crazy, right? It doesn't say Christianity. Let's not even talk about the true Christianity, what we see in the Bible. And so do I want them, you know, how would I want them to interact with me in considering what I have to say? And probably along those same lines, you need to, you know, be at least approachable.
Do you think there's a pearls before swine point that you have to find? I don't know where the wisdom is and how to find those sometimes.
Yeah. That's what's hard, right? Is you have these competing truisms, and because all that's true, but all this is true too. You know, of like if every single time I'm talking to this person, we're talking about flat earth, like. At some point,
There is a line to be drawn about your own faith. You certainly don't want to engage in discussions to the degree that you are weakened and you fall away. That would be a travesty. And so that's certainly something that you need to, I need to evaluate for myself. How much of this can I take in a dose at a time, or what time can I devote to this? Because time is limited. What can I be doing at this time that, would it be devoted to this conspiracy theory study? Well, how much do I want to do?
Yeah.
To me, there's a difference in secular conspiracy theories. Those aren't worth my time typically at all. I mean, I'll listen. I want to hear what they have to say, but I want to redirect to, well, there's things that we have power over, there's things we don't, and there's things that we're given in the scriptures. Redirect where my priorities in life. But when brothers in Christ that were unbelievers before, that have been baptized believers, there were some I've studied with that had wild ideas about Revelation and about all the different theories about coming back and left behind and all that. So we were not going to get past it unless we said, we're just going to study the book of Revelation together. And we're just going to go through it just chapter by chapter and just talk through it. And once that was out of their thinking, like, oh, wow, it's almost like the veil came off. Like, oh, well, that's just fake. What was real? But I would not have been successful if I hadn't just said, okay, we just got to do it. To
Right.
months.
and it's an awesome attitude because you could have been dismissive.
Because it was religious. If it was just, hey, whatever, QAnon or whatever you want to throw it, I'm not gonna waste my time. But if it's a religious thing, okay, well, let's talk about it. And if they're genuinely desiring truth, I'll proceed. If they're not, they're just trying to get me. I don't have time for that. So I'm gonna guard myself.
All right, sorry. Ladies first.
I don't know. I think sometimes it's also a veil for other problems that are going on in their lives. Like they're trying to grasp for power, or they're trying to grasp for security, and they're finding it in these conspiracy theories. And so sometimes it's even just getting to the root of, why are you believing this? Like, why is this what you're grabbing onto? And if you can figure that out, it's not always the case. Sometimes people just think it's cool. But sometimes there is like a need for control. And so if that's what's going on, then a deeper conversation redirecting to something that's worth more and deeper and real is a better move than really getting into a debate with them.
Something like that. They're seeking and they're always looking for stuff. Just plant the seed. Just plant the seed. Then maybe next time we have this conversation, I can build on that seed and you try to put a little wedge in there somewhere. Try to hopefully redirect, not immediate, but as time goes.
Yeah, you plant the seed and you've done what you could at some point.
Exactly.
I think even in our Christian friends, there are going to be people who like to learn about these kind of things and people who don't. Things don't get mad at me, but so basically, like,
That's what I'm
non-person, and I don't even.
Waste of time. Yeah.
She learns all the things and figures them out, and then when I find something in the news that freaks me out, I text her and I say, "Does the microwave turn my food poison?" And she says, "No." And then I say, "Great."
So this is a great way to, find your friends.
That's how she likes to learn about this kind of thing. And that's like good for her brain. I do not want to know about any of those things. It's bad for my brain. So you just have to kind of know yourself, and also it's helpful sometimes to have friends that you like.
And obviously you're close to people and have that confidence in
And
each other.
you can still get along. Like there's some things we don't talk about. We don't know about it.
So just real fast. So one thing that I think a lot of times, some people just like the obscure. They just like to know, right? So my mind went to Acts 17 with the philosophers and where Paul, they're like, tell me what is this new doctrine? They just want to be entertained, and in verse 21 says, for all the Athenians and the foreigners who were there spent their time in nothing else but either to tell or to hear something new. That was their thing. They just it was all about, tell me something new. Let me consider this. And so there's definitely that personality. Yes.
Can I be the counterculture for just 1 second? Go back real quick. There is value.
Tell me, go back.
No, wait, it's the second time I told you to go back. So I think there's value, just like just a little value in that we do look and keep knowledge of secular things that are happening. And we talked about, I think you even said like, what it was, tomorrow's news is today's conspiracy theory or something. Okay, so had you talked about in the 70s or the 60s or whatever, talked about, communists infiltrating the United States and doing these weird things. Okay, fine. People are going to think you're nuts. Okay. Now, at the same time, we look 40 years down the road and we have men calling themselves women and women calling themselves men. And you have people being broken into different groups so that we're not as a unified country anymore. We're like, where in the world does this come from? It came from a conspiracy theory that happened 40 or 50 years ago that was actually architected and thrown on our country. Now, I think that there's value in keeping a knowledge of the world around us. Now, I say all that to say, this is a battle that happens with me almost daily. Like, okay, where's your time going? What are you doing? Where are you spending
This
it?
is the purpose of the class. So just keep going. Just go out.
All right,
I got my flicker ready.
because I mean,
So
there you
the
go.
question is, what do you do with that? That as a question, or as just a way of looking at it, all this other stuff, like what, okay, cool, what do I do with this now? Like how, as a Christian, is it, well, the Bible meant this, but then now all this craziness is happening, whether it's true or not, doesn't matter at this point. Does this change with what the Bible says? Because even with outside actors, kind of like what you were saying, is God still God? Yeah, absolutely, right? So this is what, I mean, I go to Daniel when I think about this. Daniel, I think is my favorite book of the Bible. So in Daniel 2, verse 21, Nebuchadnezzar's first dream, Daniel telling him, he's interpreting it, he says, and he changed in verse 21, and he changes, talking about God, and he changes the times and seasons. He removes kings and raises up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. And then he reiterates it, giving commentary on the second dream in chapter 4, verse 17, halfway through it says, that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men, gives it to whomever he will, and sets over it the lowest of men. And I won't go into the Nebuchadnezzar's son Belshazzar's when he yanks the kingdom away from him in one night. Like, who's in charge? God's in charge. So either as a Christian you believe this, or I'm getting fired up. Like you either believe this or it's not true. And so a Christian, like, should you have this anxiety that this weight on your shoulders with all these things, International Monetary Fund, George Soros, all like at some point God is God. Like, worry about what you have work to do. There's work to do here now in your circle. If you're in some high government agency, great, use your good. If you're a mom and are raising kids, great, use your good there. Who cares about George Soros? Like it, yes.
That's the thing, like, you can consume, different things that interest you, but you don't want to be consumed by it. We always want to make sure that we're setting our mind on things above. Now, I heard something recently, I don't even remember where it was, but like, if you have something that you're worried about, make a list of 2 categories, things that you can control or change and things that you can't, and then you can't worry about these. So yeah, if George Soros is doing whatever, I can't do anything about him. So I'm not going to have anxiety about it. But if there's something that I can control, then I'll do some kind of action on that thing. But otherwise, I mean, all of these spiritual things that we're supposed to be focusing on, that's our priority here.
Right. And the things you can't control, you can pray,
Exactly.
right? Because God is he hears the prayers of the righteous. Again, these are all facts. They're either true or they're not. God exists or he doesn't. If he does exist, then he is God and he reigns in kingdom. Whether or not there's some secret agency or whatever, like so like that, you have to have that inner calm of knowing that God is God. That would be when I think about this, I meditate on some of the conversations I have. This is what I always come to, and that helps me. So thank you. Come back next week, please.